I guess every story about family drama starts with everything was fine until. Well, my story isn't any different. Everything really was fine until I turned 11. I'm Tasha, and back then, I lived with my parents in a cozy 2-story house. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was home. Mom and Dad seemed happy enough, at least to my kid eyes. The divorce came as a surprise, even though it was peaceful. No screaming, no fighting over furniture, nothing like what my friend Jenny went through when her parents split up. Dad just moved out one day, taking his tools and clothes with him. He hugged me tight and said, "I'll always be here for you, princess." Mom handled it well at first. When Dad's alimony checks came in, she'd roll her eyes and mutter under her breath about how it wasn't enough, but that was about it. I spent weekends with Dad at his small apartment above the auto repair shop he was trying to get off the ground. The place always smelled like motor oil and coffee, but I loved it. Then, about a year after the divorce, Mom met Richard. He had 2 daughters, Sarah and Emma, both a couple years younger than me. When Mom told me about their engagement, her eyes lit up like Christmas lights. "Just think about it, honey," she gushed, holding my hands in hers. "You'll have sisters. We'll be a proper family again. Richard is such a wonderful man, and his girls are so sweet. You'll love having siblings." I remember nodding eagerly, caught up in her excitement. I'd always wanted sisters, and the way Mom described them made it sound like a fairy tale coming true. She spent hours talking about our future life together, painting pictures of family game nights and sister bonding sessions. The wedding was small but nice. I wore a pale blue dress and carried a basket of flowers. Sarah and Emma wore matching pink dresses and kept whispering and giggling together during the ceremony. I tried to catch their eyes, hoping they'd include me in their secret jokes, but they just turned away. When they moved in, I was so excited I could barely sleep the night before. I'd cleaned my room, made space in the bathroom cabinet for their things, and even put together welcome cards for each of them. Mom helped me arrange flowers in their rooms. "See? You're already being such a good sister," she said, kissing my forehead. If only I'd known then what was coming. Maybe I would have fought harder to keep things the way they were. Maybe I would have told Dad how I really felt about Mom remarrying. But I was 11, and I believed in fairy tales about happy blended families. It took exactly 3 days for my fairy tale to turn into a nightmare. On the 4th morning after they moved in, I woke up early as usual to get ready for school. But when I tried to go into the bathroom, the door was locked. "Just a minute," Sarah called out in a sing-song voice. That minute turned into 45. I kept knocking, telling them I needed to get ready for school, but all I heard was giggling and the hairdryer running. When they finally came out, both Sarah and Emma were perfectly groomed, wearing matching outfits. "Beauty takes time," Emma smirked as they passed me. "You should know that." "Oh wait, maybe you don't." I barely had time to brush my teeth before the school bus came. That became our new morning routine, them hogging the bathroom while I waited, usually ending up being late or rushing. But the bathroom was just the beginning. At dinner that night, I went to sit in my usual spot next to Mom, but Sarah had already taken it. When I opened my mouth to protest, Mom cut me off. "Tasha, honey, why don't you sit over there?" She pointed to the chair furthest from her, next to the edge of the table. "It's just a chair, don't make a fuss." I watched as Mom served Sarah and Emma first, cutting their meat into perfect pieces, asking if they wanted more juice, fussing over them like she used to fuss over me. Richard beamed at the scene while I picked at my food in silence. Things got worse when Sarah spotted my collection of hair accessories, the ones Mom and I had bought together during our weekly shopping trips. "Oh my God, Emma, look at these," Sarah exclaimed, pulling out my favorite butterfly clips. "They'd look so much better on us." "Those are mine," I said, trying to take them back. "Girls should share," Mom said firmly. "Tasha, don't be greedy. Sarah and Emma are your sisters now." After that, Sarah and Emma started calling me Greedy Tasha whenever adults weren't listening. But that wasn't enough for them. My textbooks would mysteriously end up with torn pages. My clothes would get accidentally stained with nail polish. My homework would vanish, only to reappear crumpled in the trash. Every time I tried to tell Mom, she'd shake her head disapprovingly. "Tasha, stop trying to get attention. I know this adjustment is hard, but making up stories about your sisters isn't the way to handle it." "They're not my sisters," I finally snapped one day after finding my favorite sweater with a huge hole in it. That earned me a lecture from both Mom and Richard about family and gratitude. But the final blow came a week later when Mom announced she was reorganizing the bedrooms. "Sarah and Emma need more space for their things," she explained, not quite meeting my eyes. "Your room has better closets, so they'll take that one. We've already moved your stuff to the small room next to the laundry." The small room was basically a glorified closet with a window. It barely fit my bed and dresser. When I saw all my things crammed into that tiny space, something inside me broke a little. This wasn't just about a room, it was about my place in this family, or rather, my lack of one. Richard wasn't content just letting his daughters torment me, he had to join in too. Any little thing I did wrong became proof that I was a difficult child. If I was quiet, I was sulking. If I spoke up, I was being disruptive. I couldn't win. "Just like your father," he'd say, shaking his head whenever I didn't meet his impossible standards. "Always causing problems. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, does it?" The funny thing was, Dad was actually doing pretty well with his auto repair business. He specialized in luxury cars, and while it was tough at first, he was slowly building a solid reputation. I never told Richard this, though. Let him think what he wanted. My weekends with Dad became my lifeline. We'd order pizza, watch old movies, and he'd tell me stories about the fancy cars he was working on. Sometimes I'd sit in his office while he did paperwork, just enjoying the peaceful atmosphere. "How are things at home, Princess?" he'd ask occasionally, and I'd always say fine. He had enough on his plate, working long hours to get his business off the ground. The last thing he needed was to worry about me too. The years crawled by. I threw myself into my studies, spending as much time as possible at the library or with friends. Anything to avoid being home. Before I knew it, high school graduation was approaching. I'd applied to several colleges. I got acceptance letters from most of them. I was over the moon, finally, a chance to get away, to start fresh. The day after graduation, I couldn't contain my excitement anymore. We were all sitting at dinner, and I decided to share my news. "I got accepted to several colleges," I announced, pulling out the acceptance letters. "Even got offered some partial scholarships. I really like the business program at." Richard's laugh cut through my words like a knife. Not a genuine laugh, one of those mocking ones that makes your stomach sink. "College?" he sneered. "And who exactly is going to pay for that? Your loser father? The guy who can barely keep his little garage afloat?" I stared at him, the letters suddenly feeling heavy in my hands. "I have scholarships, and I can get loans." "Don't be ridiculous," he interrupted. "We're not co-signing any loans for you. We're saving our money for Sarah and Emma's education." I turned to Mom, desperately hoping she'd stand up for me, defend me, be my mother for once. She just looked down at her plate. "Richard's right, honey," she said softly. "We need to think about the girl's future." Something inside me snapped. All the hurt, all the rejection, all the years of being pushed aside, it all came pouring out at once. "You haven't paid any attention to me in years," I shouted, pushing back from the table. "All you care about is pleasing your precious husband and his perfect daughters. When's the last time you even asked how I was doing? When's the last time you acted like my mother instead of their stepmother?" The silence that followed was deafening. Then came the sharp crack of skin against skin. It took me a moment to realize what had happened, that my mother, my own mother, had slapped me across the face. My cheek stung, but what hurt more was seeing Sarah and Emma's expressions. They were actually smiling, clearly enjoying the show. Richard sat there with a satisfied smirk, like he'd been waiting for this moment. I touched my cheek, feeling the heat radiating from where her hand had struck. Mom just stood there, her hand still raised, her face a mixture of anger and something else. Shock? I didn't stick around to find out. I ran to my tiny room and started throwing things into my suitcase. Clothes, photos, my few remaining precious possessions that Sarah and Emma hadn't ruined. I could hear movement in the house, but no one came to check on me. No one tried to stop me. No one said they were sorry. I made it about a block before the adrenaline wore off and reality hit me. I was 18, with no money, no plan, and nowhere to go. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and called Dad. "Hey princess, what's up?" His cheerful voice almost made me break down right there. Can you come get me?" I managed to say, trying to keep my voice steady. "Of course. Where are you?" 15 minutes later, a sleek black Mercedes pulled up beside me. For a moment, I thought I'd given him the wrong street. There was no way this was my dad's car. But there he was, grinning through the open window. "Like my new ride?" he asked as he got out to help me with my suitcase. "This is yours?" I stared at him in disbelief. "I thought it was a customer's car." He laughed, that warm, familiar laugh I'd grown up with. "Nope, all mine. Bought it last week. Business has been good." Then he noticed my suitcase, and his expression changed. "Tasha, what's going on? Why are you out here with a suitcase?" The whole story came pouring out, the college acceptances, Richard's mockery, Mom's betrayal, the slap. Dad's face grew darker with each word. By the end, he was gripping the steering wheel so tight, his knuckles were white. "I'm going over there right now," he growled, starting to turn the car around. "No, Dad, please don't," I grabbed his arm. "It's not worth it. I just want to leave." He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "You're right. Let's go home." Over lunch at his place, he'd learned to cook pretty decent pasta over the years. Dad dropped another bombshell. "Remember that fleet contract I was bidding on? With the luxury car rental company?" He was trying to act casual, but I could see him practically bouncing with excitement. "Well, I got it. Exclusive maintenance contract for their entire fleet. The business is really taking off." I was genuinely happy for him, but I must have looked a bit dejected thinking about my own situation, because he quickly added, "And you know what else? I've been saving money for years, putting aside whatever I could for your college fund. It's not enough for an Ivy League school, but combined with your scholarships." I nearly choked on my pasta. You've been saving for my college?" He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Of course I have, princess. Did you really think I'd let Richard be right about me?" For the first time that day, I started crying, but these were happy tears. All those years I'd spent protecting Dad from my problems, and here he'd been quietly planning for my future the whole time. I decided to keep my college plans secret from Mom and her perfect family. Let them think they'd won. I spent that summer living with Dad and working at the Sweet Bean Cafe downtown to save up some extra money. Then one afternoon, the bell above the door chimed, and in walked Sarah and Emma, dressed like they were heading to a fashion show instead of a coffee shop. They settled into a booth in my section, of course they did, and smirked as I approached with my notepad. Well, Sarah drawled, loud enough for nearby customers to hear. "Looks like someone found their true calling." Emma snickered. "Yeah, we just wanted to see how the other half lives, before we head off to college in the fall. Dad's already picked out the perfect schools for us." "Can I take your order?" I kept my voice professional, fighting back a smile. If they only knew. "Oh, you'll probably still be taking orders when we graduate," Sarah continued, examining her manicured nails. "But don't worry, maybe we'll leave you nice tips when we visit home from college." I just smiled and wrote down their complicated, half-CAF, extra hot drink orders. Let them have their moment. I knew where I was headed. That fall, I started college in the neighboring state. I threw myself into my business classes, made new friends, and started building a life that had nothing to do with my past. Mom never called to apologize for the slap or for anything else. I didn't call her either. Dad visited whenever he could, and we talked almost every day. 4 years flew by. I graduated with honors and landed a job at a marketing firm in the same city as my college. Starting salary wasn't huge, but it was enough to rent a small apartment and live comfortably. I worked hard, stayed late, took on extra projects. My bosses noticed. The promotions started coming. First junior manager, then senior manager, then team leader. Each one came with a nice bump in pay. I was able to start saving serious money for the first time in my life. Then one day, Dad showed up at my apartment with a massive grin on his face. His business had expanded to 3 locations, and he'd just signed contracts with 2 more luxury car rental companies. "I want you to have this," he said, pulling out a cashier's check. The amount made me dizzy. "It's for a down payment on your own place. You've worked so hard, princess. You deserve this." 2 months later, I was moving into my own apartment, not rented, owned. More raises came. More promotions. I started thinking about buying a house, something with a garden maybe, in one of those quiet neighborhoods outside the city. Then one evening, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Tasha?" The voice was hesitant, familiar in a way that made my stomach clench. It's Mom. "I think it's time we talked. I want to try to fix things between us." "Okay," I heard myself say. "Let's talk." We agreed to meet at a small cafe downtown, neutral territory. When Mom walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked older, tired, nothing like the competent woman who had chosen her new family over me years ago. "You look wonderful," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. Her hands were shaking slightly as she arranged her napkin. We made awkward small talk about the weather and my job until the waitress brought our coffee. Then Mom took a deep breath and the real story came out. "I left Richard," she said, staring into her cup. "Or rather, he left me. After we mortgaged the house to pay for the girls' college." I waited, letting her continue at her own pace. "They promised they'd help with the payments once they graduated." She laughed bitterly. "But when the time came, they had excuses. Always excuses. The job market was tough, they needed to focus on their careers, they had their own expenses." She wiped her eyes with a trembling hand. "We lost the house. All those years of payments, gone. And Richard, he just packed up and moved in with Sarah. Said he couldn't handle the financial stress anymore." "Mom," I started, but she held up her hand. "Please, let me finish. I was wrong, Tasha. I chose them over you. I let them hurt you. I hurt you. And I am so sorry." The tears in her eyes were real. The tremor in her voice was real. And despite everything, despite all the years of pain and rejection, I found myself reaching across the table to take her hand. "I forgive you," I said softly, surprising myself with how much I meant it. The next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation. About Mom, alone and homeless after giving everything to people who had given nothing back. It felt like karma, in a way, but it didn't make me happy. Instead, I felt a strange mix of sadness and opportunity, a chance to be the bigger person. I called her on a Wednesday evening. "I've been thinking about buying a house," I said after we exchanged hellos. "Something in the old neighborhood, with a garden maybe. It would be too big for just me, but maybe you'd like to live there?" I took a week off work and flew home to house hunt. Found a beautiful place just outside town, nothing fancy, but solid and welcoming, with a wraparound porch and mature trees in the yard. Mom cried when she saw it. When Dad heard about my decision, I expected him to be upset. Instead, he surprised me. "You've got a bigger heart than most, princess," he said, hugging me tight. "I'm proud of you." The next few months fell into a pleasant routine. I'd fly in for weekend visits, spend time with Dad first, then head over to the new house to see Mom. We were rebuilding our relationship slowly but surely. She seemed happier, more like the mom I remembered from childhood. During one visit, I noticed some unfamiliar things in the house: men's boots by the door, a jacket I didn't recognize hanging in the hallway. "Oh, just a friend visiting," Mom said quickly when I asked. "You know how it is." I didn't think much of it at the time. Maybe I should have. The call came on a Tuesday morning. I was just settling into work when my phone lit up with Aunt Carol's number. "Tasha, honey," she said, her voice hesitant. "There's something you need to know. It's about your mother. Well, Richard's living in the house. Him and his daughters. They moved in months ago." "That's impossible," I said. "I was just there 2 weeks ago." "It was just Mom." "Because she makes them leave before you visit," Aunt Carol said gently. "They clear out every time you're scheduled to come. I found out from Marie next door. She's been watching them come and go for months now." Suddenly, those friends' belongings I'd seen made terrible sense. The boots, the jacket. The way Mom had brushed off my questions. I thanked her, hung up, and booked the first flight home. No warning, no calls to Mom. Just grabbed my laptop, I could work remotely, and headed to the airport. It was Wednesday afternoon when I pulled up to the house in my rental car. Richard's old pickup was in the driveway, the same one he'd had all those years ago. My key turned smoothly in the lock. The scene in the kitchen could have been pulled straight from my teenage years. Mom at the stove, wearing her favorite apron, fussing over a pot of something that smelled like Richard's favorite beef stew. Sarah and Emma at the kitchen table, looking exactly like their old entitled selves, just older. Richard in his usual chair, reading the newspaper. Mom saw me first. The wooden spoon she was holding clattered to the floor. "Tasha," her face went white. "I wasn't expecting you until Saturday." "Clearly," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "What are they doing here?" "We live here now," Sarah announced with a smirk. "Mom invited us." She realized family should stick together. "Family?" I turned to Mom, who was nervously wiping her hands on her apron. "After everything they did to you? After they cost you your house?" "They apologized," Mom said weakly. "They're trying to make things right. Richard's changed, the girls have changed." "Get them out," I cut her off. "Now. This is my house, and I want them gone." "No." Mom straightened up, and I saw that familiar stubborn look cross her face. "I love them, and I want them here." "Love them?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "They drove you into debt. They cost you your house. Have you forgotten how they treated me? How they bullied me every single day? How they destroyed my things, stole my room, made my life hell?" "That was years ago," Mom waved her hand dismissively. "They were just children then." "And what about now?" I demanded. "They used you for college money and abandoned you. Richard left you when things got tough. How can you just forgive that?" "Because they're family," Mom insisted, her chin lifting stubbornly. "They made mistakes, but they're sorry now." Sarah and Emma exchanged smug looks. Richard just sat there with that same self-satisfied smile I remembered from my childhood. "Fine," I said, my voice ice cold. "Then I'm giving you a choice, Mom. Right now. Them or me." The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. I watched Mom's face, searching for any sign of the mother I used to know, the one who used to braid my hair and kiss my scraped knees and tell me I could be anything I wanted to be. "I choose them," she said finally. "We're happy together, Tasha. Why can't you just accept that?" Something inside me hardened permanently. "You have 2 days to get out of my house. All of you. You can't do this." Mom's voice rose to a shriek. "I'm your mother. You can't throw me out." "Watch me." I turned and walked out, their voices following me down the driveway. 2 days later, I returned. Nothing had changed. Their cars were still in the driveway, and when I walked in, they were all sitting in the living room like they owned the place. "I told you to leave," I said. Mom actually laughed. "And I told you, you can't throw me out. I'm your mother." "Fine." I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. "Then I'll let the police explain it to you." "You wouldn't dare." Richard started to rise from his chair. "Hello?" "Yes, I need assistance removing unauthorized occupants from my property." I stated my address clearly, maintaining eye contact with Mom the whole time. What followed was ugly. The police arrived within minutes. Mom screamed and cried as the officers explained that yes, I could evict them, and no, she had no legal right to stay. Richard turned purple with rage, calling me every name he could think of. Sarah and Emma joined in, their true colors showing through their designer clothes and fake smiles. "You ungrateful bitch," Mom shrieked as the police escorted them out. "After everything I've done for you." "Everything you've done for me?" I watched them load their belongings into their cars. "Name one thing, Mom. Just one thing you've done for me since the day you married him." She had no answer for that. "Aunt Carol keeps me updated, though I never ask." They're living in a small apartment across town, struggling to make rent. Richard still can't hold down a job. Sarah and Emma never visit, too busy with their own lives to care about the mother who sacrificed everything for them. Sometimes Mom calls late at night, but I never answer. The house sits empty most of the time. I'm thinking about selling it, maybe buying something closer to the city where I live now. Something smaller, cozier. Something that doesn't hold any echoes of the past. Growing up in our modest two-story house, I learned early on that my sister Lisa was different. Special, as my parents would say. I was 6 when she was born, and from the very beginning, everything in our household revolved around her delicate health. "Sarah, close that window right now," Mom would shout from downstairs. "Your sister might catch a cold." This was the soundtrack of my childhood, a constant reminder that Lisa's well-being was everyone's primary concern. I remember the first time I really understood how different our roles would be. I was 12, and Lisa had just started elementary school. She came home one day with a runny nose, nothing serious, but you'd think she had pneumonia from how my parents reacted. "This is your fault, Sarah," Dad's words cut through me like a knife. "You must have left the door open too long when you went to school this morning." I wanted to argue that Lisa had probably caught it from one of her classmates, like any normal kid would, but I knew better than to speak up. Instead, I just nodded and accepted my punishment of being grounded for the weekend. That same year, Mom started delegating household chores. While other kids my age were playing after school, I was learning how to properly dust furniture, vacuum carpets, and even do laundry. "But Mom, why doesn't Lisa have to help?" I asked one day, watching my sister sprawled on the couch watching TV while I folded what felt like mountains of clothes. Mom's response was quick and sharp. "Your sister has a weak immune system, Sarah. The doctors say she shouldn't overexert herself. Besides, you're so good at these things already." That became the pattern of our lives. If something needed doing, I did it. If something went wrong, it was my fault. When Lisa got a D in math in 4th grade, Dad grounded me for a week because I should have helped her study better. When she broke Mom's favorite coffee mug, somehow it was because I should have been watching her more carefully. I remember one particularly frustrating incident when Lisa was 10 and I was 16. She had taken my favorite sweater without asking and spilled juice all over it. When I complained to Mom, she just sighed and said, "Sarah, you should have put it somewhere she couldn't reach it. You know how careless she can be." That was the moment I started dreaming about college, about escape. I threw myself into my studies, knowing that education was my ticket to freedom. Every time I felt overwhelmed by the unfairness at home, I channeled that energy into my schoolwork. My teachers noticed my dedication, and my grades were excellent. But at home, even my academic success was somehow twisted to highlight Lisa's struggles. "See how easy it is for Sarah?" Mom would say to Lisa. "You just need to try harder, sweetie." But Lisa never had to try harder, Because there were always excuses ready for why she couldn't succeed, and I was always there to pick up her slack. The day I graduated high school, everything changed. I had already accepted that college wasn't in my future, we weren't exactly rolling in money, and I figured any savings would go to Lisa's education. I'd been looking at job listings, planning to work at the local diner while taking some community college classes on the side. That evening, after all the graduation ceremonies were done, Mom and Dad called me into the living room. Lisa was sprawled on the couch as usual, playing on her phone. "Sarah, sit down," Dad said, his voice unusually serious. "We need to talk about your future." My stomach clenched. Here it comes, I thought. The lecture about responsibility, about helping the family, about putting my dreams on hold. Mom reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "We've been saving," she said, sliding it across the coffee table. "Ever since you were little." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a bank statement showing an account in my name with enough money for 4 years at state college. But I thought, I stammered, looking between them and the paper in my hands. "We can see how well you're doing," Mom explained, glancing briefly at Lisa, who was pretending not to listen. "And Lisa, well, college might not be in her future. We thought this money would be better spent on you." I was speechless. For the first time in my life, I was getting something that Lisa wasn't. It felt strange, almost wrong after all these years. "But," Dad added, his tone growing stern, "we need you to promise us something." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "When you finish college and get a good job, you'll help the family. Don't forget about your sister." "Of course," I said quickly, still stunned by this turn of events. "I promise." Lisa suddenly got up and stormed out of the room, slamming her door upstairs. Mom sighed but didn't follow her, a stark contrast to how they usually coddled her every mood. That fall, I packed my bags and headed to state college, 3 states away. The distance felt like freedom. For the first time in my life, I could open windows without worrying about anyone catching a cold. I could study without being interrupted to help with chores or watch Lisa. 2 months before graduation, I received an offer I couldn't refuse, a position at Anderson & Global, one of the most prestigious firms in the city. The salary was excellent, and the opportunity was too good to pass up. When I told my parents, they were surprisingly understanding about me not coming back home. I found a decent apartment not far from the office and settled into my new life. I kept in regular contact with my family, calling them every weekend. Our conversations usually centered around Lisa, how she was still finding herself after high school, not working, not in college, just existing. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't responsible for fixing that situation. 3 years into my job at Anderson & Global, Mom called with that tone in her voice, the one she always used when she wanted something. I was reviewing quarterly reports when my phone lit up with her name. "Sarah, honey," she began, her voice sweet as honey. "You know Lisa's been having such a hard time finding work." I closed my eyes, already knowing where this was going. "Your company is so successful," she continued. "Couldn't you put in a good word for your sister? Maybe get her a position there? She's very smart, you know that." My stomach twisted into knots. How could I explain that Lisa, who hadn't worked a day in her life and hadn't gone to college, wouldn't make it past the first round of applications at a firm like Anderson & Global? "Well," I said carefully, "we do have some openings. Let me send over the application form so Lisa can see what the requirements are." That evening, I forwarded the standard application form to Lisa's email. The requirements were crystal clear: bachelor's degree required, proficiency in SAP and Oracle systems, fluent in 2 foreign languages besides English, minimum 5 years of relevant experience preferred. After that, Mom stopped asking about getting Lisa a job at my company. Life went on. I worked hard, got promoted twice, and started building up a decent savings account. The thought of buying my own place began to take shape, no more rent, a place to truly call my own. 2 years later, I decided to visit home for the first time in months. The house looked smaller than I remembered, the paint peeling in places. Lisa was still living there, sprawled on the same couch, scrolling through her phone, just like when we were teenagers. Over dinner, I shared my plans. "I've been saving up," I said, pushing my peas around the plate. "I'm thinking about buying an apartment. The market's good right now, and with my credit score, I could get a decent mortgage rate." The table went quiet. Mom and Dad exchanged looks, while Lisa suddenly seemed very interested in her mashed potatoes. A week later, Mom called. Her voice was different this time, worried, almost desperate. "Sarah, honey, we need to talk," she began. "Your father's not doing well. His back is acting up again, and he can't take those extra shifts at work anymore." I listened as she listed their troubles: the leaking roof, outdated plumbing, walls that needed painting. Each problem came with a price tag attached. "We're barely making ends meet," she said, her voice cracking. "And after all we did for you, honey, the college money, giving you a chance at a good life. Now it's time for you to help your family, Sarah. We need you." There it was. The reminder of my debt to them, the obligation I'd promised to fulfill all those years ago. The dream of my own apartment seemed to fade with each word my mother spoke. After that phone call, I spent several sleepless nights thinking about my parents' situation. The guilt ate at me. Here I was, planning to buy an apartment while they couldn't even fix their leaking roof. Finally, I made a decision that would change everything. I called Mom back on a Sunday morning. "I've been thinking about what you said," I started, trying to keep my voice steady. "I want to help. I'm going to give you access to my account. You can spend up to $1,500 per month. That should cover the repairs and help with the bills." The silence on the other end lasted so long, I thought we'd lost connection. Then Mom's voice came back, thick with emotion. "Sarah, that's so generous. It's such a large amount, we probably won't even need that much. Just enough for the basic repairs and some groceries." I walked her through setting up the access on her phone. "Just remember the limit," I reminded her. $1,500 per month. Of course, she assured me. "We'll be very careful with it." The first few months went smoothly. I was busy at work and barely checked the account activity, but when I did glance at it, I saw modest withdrawals: $700 here, $800 there. Mostly hardware stores, grocery shops, and utility payments. It seemed like they were being responsible with the money, just as Mom had promised. But then things started to change. The amounts began creeping up gradually: $900 one month, $1,100 the next. I tried not to worry about it. After all, they were still under the limit, and home repairs could be expensive. Then came the notification that changed everything. I was in a meeting when my phone buzzed with an alert I'd set up for large purchases: $2,000 charge at Luxe Boutique. I nearly dropped my phone. That couldn't be right. As soon as the meeting ended, I pulled up my account details. There it was in black and white, a $2,000 purchase at one of the most expensive clothing stores in their area. I stared at the screen in disbelief. I'd never even shopped there myself. With my apartment savings goal, I couldn't justify spending that much on clothes. My hands were shaking as I dialed Mom's number. "Mom, I just got a notification about a $2,000 purchase at Luxe Boutique," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "What's going on?" There was a pause, then a nervous laugh. "Oh, that. Well, you know my birthday's coming up next month," she said, her voice unnaturally bright. I saw this absolutely gorgeous dress, and I thought, well, I've been feeling so down lately with all our troubles. I just wanted to treat myself a little. "Okay," I said, wanting to avoid an argument. "Just, please stick to the limit we agreed on." "Of course, honey," she said quickly. Then added, "By the way, I'm still looking forward to my birthday present from you. You haven't forgotten, have you?" I sat there after hanging up, staring at the account activity on my screen. Something didn't feel right, but I couldn't put my finger on exactly what. This wasn't just about a dress, this was about something else, something I wasn't seeing yet. From here I started checking my account more regularly, setting up detailed transaction alerts on my phone. What I saw made my stomach churn. The spending pattern was escalating at an alarming rate. Mom had blown past the $1,500 limit like it didn't exist. One month it was $2,000, then $2,500, and before I knew it, some months were hitting $4,000. My savings account, which I'd been nurturing for years with dreams of my own home, was shrinking instead of growing. One evening, after seeing yet another large transaction, I pulled up my account on my laptop and created a spreadsheet. The numbers were right there in black and white. In just a few months, they'd spent more than I had in an entire year. My own monthly expenses were modest: rent, utilities, groceries, and the occasional dinner out with colleagues. I drove a used car, bought my clothes on sale, and packed my lunch most days. Meanwhile, my parents were supposedly spending thousands on what exactly? I decided it was time for a visit. I needed to see these home improvements for myself. "Mom," I said when I called her. "I'm thinking of coming home next weekend. It'll be nice to celebrate your birthday in person, and I'd love to see that dress you bought. Plus, you can show me all the repairs you've done to the house." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Mom finally spoke, her voice had an edge I'd never heard before. "Oh no, honey, don't come," she said quickly. "I'm not really celebrating my birthday this year. I'm not feeling up to it. But Mom, I haven't been home in months, and I'd really like to see." "No," she cut me off sharply, then immediately softened her tone. "It's just not a good time, Sarah. But you can send my birthday gift by mail if you'd like." That call set off every alarm bell in my head. I spent the entire night going through 6 months of bank statements, line by line. The more I looked, the less sense it made. There were charges from stores I knew my mother would never shop at, restaurants that stayed open until 2 a.m., bars I'd never heard of. The home repair expenses were there, but they were tiny compared to everything else: $150 at Home Depot, $200 at a plumbing supply store. These were dwarfed by charges from high-end boutiques, jewelry stores, and electronics shops. Someone had bought a $1,200 smartphone last month. My mother still used the same flip phone she'd had for years, saying she didn't need anything fancy. The pattern started emerging like a picture coming into focus. Teenage bars, nightclubs, designer clothing stores, makeup shops, nail salons. These weren't the expenses of my aging parents who could barely make ends meet. These were the expenses of someone else entirely, someone young, someone who liked to party, someone who had expensive taste and no job of their own. Lisa. The realization hit me like a physical blow. All those times Mom had talked about the leaking roof and broken plumbing, all those guilt trips about helping the family, it had been a smokescreen. My supposedly struggling parents weren't using my money to repair their house. They were funding my sister's extravagant lifestyle. I felt sick to my stomach as I scrolled through transaction after transaction. A $300 spa day. A $500 shopping spree at a designer outlet. $200 bar tabs multiple times a week. This was why Mom didn't want me to visit. There were no major repairs to see, no improvements to show off. Just Lisa, living it up on my dime while I pinched pennies and put off my own dreams. I spent the next morning rehearsing what I would say, pacing my apartment with my phone in hand. Finally, around noon, I made the call. "Mom," I said as soon as she answered, my voice steadier than I felt. "We need to talk about where my money is really going." There was a long pause on the other end. "What do you mean, honey?" "I think you know exactly what I mean." I took a deep breath. "The bars, the designer clothes, the new smartphone, those aren't your expenses, are they?" "They're Lisa's." I heard her inhale sharply, then let out a long sigh. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. No more sweet talk, no more pretense. "Well, what did you expect?" she said defensively. "We're family. Lisa needs nice things too." She can't help it if she hasn't found her path yet. Mom, you lied to me. You told me the money was for house repairs. We did use some of it for repairs, she interrupted. But Sarah, you have so much, and Lisa has so little. Besides, you owe us. Or have you forgotten who paid for your fancy college education? I almost laughed. I'd been expecting this, the ultimate guilt card. But I was prepared. Actually, Mom, I ran the numbers last night. Every single expense for the past 2 years. Would you like to know what I found? I pulled up my spreadsheet. In the past 24 months, you've spent $72,000 of my money. That's more than what you and Dad paid for my college tuition, plus interest. So no, I don't owe you anything anymore. The line went quiet. Then, without another word, Mom hung up. Almost on autopilot, I opened Facebook and typed in Lisa's name. I hadn't looked at her profile in months. I'd been too busy working, too focused on my own life. Now I scrolled through post after post, my anger growing with each swipe. There she was, posing in the $2,000 dress from Luxe Boutique, the one Mom had claimed was for her birthday. There was Lisa at some resort last month, lounging by a pool with a fancy cocktail. Photo after photo of parties, clubs, and restaurants I recognized from my bank statements. She was even wearing the expensive jewelry I'd unknowingly paid for, tagging herself at all the upscale places she'd visited with my money. I needed more information, so I called Aunt Marie, who had always been the family truth teller, the one person who never bought into the Lisa can do no wrong narrative. Aunt Marie, I need to ask you something, I said. Have you been to my parents' house lately? Have they done any repairs? She let out a bitter laugh. Repairs? The only thing that's changed is the house is getting worse. Your father won't even fix the broken step on the front porch. Why do you ask? I explained about the money I'd been sending, about the supposed repairs. With each word, Aunt Marie's sighs grew deeper. Oh, Sarah, she said finally. That money's not going to repairs. Lisa doesn't work, doesn't even look for jobs anymore. Just parties all the time. She paused. And now she's trying to drag my Jenny into that lifestyle too. Keeps inviting her to these wild parties, telling her how much fun it is to live free and easy. My stomach was already in knots, but what she said next made my blood run cold. There's something else you should know, Aunt Marie continued, her voice dropping. Jenny told me this in confidence, but you need to hear it. Lisa's been showing around a letter of recommendation supposedly from you. Says she interned at your company under your supervision. Jenny saw it, it has your signature and everything. Lisa's planning to use it to apply at Carlton Industries. The room started spinning. A forged letter of recommendation? With my signature? If Lisa got caught, and she would get caught, it wouldn't just be her reputation on the line. It would be mine, my company's. Everything I'd worked for could be destroyed. I hung up with Aunt Marie and immediately called Carlton Industries' HR department. My hands were shaking as I explained the situation. I need to report a fraudulent letter of recommendation, I said. My sister is applying for a position using a forged letter in my name. I never wrote it, never signed it, and she has never worked at my company. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 days later, my phone exploded with calls from my parents. When I finally answered, Mom's screaming voice nearly burst my eardrums. How dare you sabotage your sister's career, she shrieked. She was about to get that job at Carlton Industries. Mom, she forged my signature. She was finally trying to make something of herself. Mom continued as if I hadn't spoken. And you ruined it. You've always been jealous of her. I heard shuffling, then Dad's voice came on the line, angrier than I'd ever heard him. Lisa's been crying for 2 days straight because of you, he growled. Is that what you wanted? To hurt your sister? Well, congratulations. You're no daughter of mine. Consider yourself disowned. Dad, she committed fraud. If you ever want us to forgive you, he cut me off, his voice cold and calculating, You'll need to start sending us more money. Much more than before. Maybe then, someday, we might consider forgiving you for what you've done to your sister." My father's words were the last straw. Years of manipulation, guilt, and unfairness crashed over me in that moment, and suddenly everything became crystal clear. "No," I said firmly into the phone. "I don't owe you anything anymore. I helped you selflessly, and you lied to me. If you need money so badly now, why don't you ask Lisa to help? She's the one you've been spending all that money on anyway." Before they could respond, I hung up. With shaking hands, I opened my banking app and permanently revoked my mother's access to my account. As I pressed the confirm button, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, and a new one settle in my stomach. I knew what was coming. The call started the next morning. "How could you do this to us?" Mom's voice screeched through my voicemail. "After everything we've done for you." "You selfish bitch," Lisa's message followed. "You think you're so much better than everyone else with your fancy job and your perfect life." I deleted the messages without listening to the end. But they kept coming, day after day. Text messages, voicemails, emails, all filled with insults, guilt trips, and demands to restore their access to my money. Each one more desperate and angry than the last. I blocked their numbers, but they started calling from different phones. I blocked those too. A week into the barrage, Aunt Marie called. "Sarah, honey," she said gently. "I wanted to warn you, your parents are calling everyone in the family. They're telling everyone what a terrible daughter you are, how you abandoned them in their time of need." She paused. "I know the truth, and so does Jenny. We've tried telling them they're wrong, but they won't listen. I just wanted you to know what they're doing." That was 3 months ago. Now, my life has settled into a new normal. My savings account is growing again. It's amazing how quickly money accumulates when it's not being drained by others. I've started seriously looking at apartments, going to viewings on weekends. Last week, I even met with a mortgage advisor. The calls have mostly stopped, though I still get the occasional message from a new number. I delete them without reading them now. Sometimes I wonder about my parents, if Dad's back is really getting worse, if Mom is still covering for Lisa's excesses. I wonder if Lisa ever tried to forge anyone else's signature, or if she's still living the high life on someone else's dime. But mostly, I focus on my own life. I work, I save, I spend time with friends who value me for who I am, not what I can give them. I'm learning to stop feeling guilty for taking care of myself first. Will I ever speak to my family again? I honestly don't know. Maybe someday things will be different. Maybe someday they'll understand what they did wrong, or I'll find it in my heart to forgive them even if they don't. But for now, I'm focused on building the life I want, one that isn't weighed down by guilt, obligation, or other people's expectations.